Good morning, everybody, and an incredibly warm welcome to the Institute of Advanced Studies here at Leicester University. It's an absolute pleasure to do a really short opening this morning on the summit, and then I'll hand to Ksenia, who will introduce our speakers and tell you a little bit more about the agenda for the day and what's happening. So my role here at Loughborough, I'm Jo, and I look after sport across strategically the university. So how I easily try and describe it is sport at Loughborough. We do tracksuits, suits and lab coats. So everything from the playing of sport on the field of play to the research in the laboratories that's driving world-class athletic performance that resulted in 35 Olympic and Paralympic medals, to the thought leadership pieces on sport that influence policy, both globally and nationally, right the way through the teaching and education in the classroom, and how do we support the next generation of leaders and people that are involved in sports governance across all of sport. This year, we've recently published our Sporting Excellence and Opportunity Core Plan, and I've dotted some copies around the room. Please feel free to take one. And if you'd like them emailed in after, then Ksenia will be able to circulate those around. This is a real statement of intent. We're one of the only universities on the planet that has sport, health and wellbeing as a strategic theme across the university, which is cross-cutting and supported by the work of Professor David Fletcher, who's leading as Associate Pro Vice Chancellor in sport and health and wellbeing, as a real dedicated role. And in addition to having its own strategy. So what we're looking to try and do is to think about sport more holistically. And what we don't want to do is cluster sport and health and wellbeing and all together. We're working really hard to separate those out because we recognise the relationship between getting people active all over the world. There should be no IP in physical activity. So if we're supporting people to be physically active for health, we should be working collaboratively, in partnership, and taking a global perspective on that, whilst also understanding the associated benefits of wellbeing. And then, of course, within sport, it's the whole spectrum across the pyramid of sport. So how do you get people getting those functional movement skills that we want all young children to engage in, to learn how to play well, to do multi-sports when they're younger, to try everything, real leveled up to what does it take to set a world record and have Olympic performance. I was really privileged early on in my career to spend some time out in Zambia as a project with the British Council and the University of Zambia. It's going to age me, but it was about 14 years ago. And during my time out in Zambia, to see the energy and passion for sport in the community, but to better understand some of the infrastructure challenges and how those two things need to be looked at holistically, was really beneficial in terms of helping my learnings, because we were asked to do a train the trainer model, and we were taking on 3 particular sports: netball, football and athletics. So we took experts from those sports, and then we took educators. So at the time I was running a netball academy, believe it or not. I know I was kind of known for football when I was younger, but I ran a netball academy. And we were trying to look at a community programme end to end to get young children interested in the sport, with a view to then delivering a level 3 education programme, with a view to then working with the University of Zambia to do a higher level study programme. So it was about a 4-year piece of work. But for me, the fact that we're having this summit this week to really learn from some really excellent practice that has happened, to learn from some challenges, really brings home how collaboration is the way that we can collectively develop our knowledge and improve community access to sport and level up the sports development pyramid across the world. So I hope that you have vibrant and lively debates. I'd like to commend the summit organisers for really thinking about the role of sustainability in this space. I think the connection there is something that we are still looking as a university to learn from. I hope you'll note that sustainability is picked as a theme in the Sport Core Plan. So we at Loughborough are trying to consider sport and sustainability in the context of sport, notwithstanding the university's cross-cut theme in that area. So I'd be more than delighted to have a coffee with any interested partners after that, if there's any learnings from the sustainability space as well. So I hope you have a fabulous day. I really apologise that I can't stay. My diary is absolutely rammed today. I'm off down to talk to our Director of Sport. But I'm delighted to welcome you and have a fabulous day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jo is our Pro Vice Chancellor for Sport, and we really appreciate the support. Thank you. Welcome back, day 2 of the Africa Summit. It's going to be a very busy day and very exciting day today. We have keynotes, we have panel discussions. For those of you who are joining us online, just a quick reminder, we are running a hybrid session. The keynotes will be recorded. The panel discussions are recorded, but will probably be edited at a later date. So we will then release everything as a podcast and as a video on our YouTube channel next week. I was told not to overpromise. So for those of you joining us online, please post any questions in the Q&A section. We are monitoring the chat throughout the day today and for the rest of the week. For those of you in the audience who've got the privilege and the joy of chatting to our speakers during lunchtime as well and ask questions, of course, during the sessions. To move us to the next part of today, it is my absolute privilege to welcome our keynote speaker today, and this is Dr. Sambili-Gicheha, who is joining us from the Commonwealth Secretariat. Lean is an advisor for sport development and peace, and she will be talking today about the power of sport in shaping societies and communities' resilience. Lean is a long-time Loughborough person. In fact, she still lives in Loughborough. Am I allowed to say that? So welcome, Lean. It's always a pleasure to see you, and we're really looking forward to your keynote today.
All right. Amazing. As an African PhD student many years ago, I sat in the audience listening to one of the first IAS lectures, believe it or not, on nation. I was struck by the salience of the topic and how the views were often unpacked, each of them causing us to reflect on the concept of nation, both as cohesive and disruptive. So to stand here today as an IAS visiting fellow on Africa for Africa, I'm deeply humbled and I'm also deeply grateful at what a full circle moment this is. I may wear many hats, but in this moment, I am proud and I stand proud as an alumnus of Loughborough and Loughborough University. I wish to thank those who had the courage to go ahead, and I too stand ready to do the same for the next generation. I especially would like to thank my supervisors, well, now former, Professor Richard Giulianotti in the room, and Dr. Holly Collins-Randall, my family, and the IAS for the foresight in establishing the safe and dynamic space where all these views are shared. Together, we are here to shape a better world, one address at a time. It's a real privilege. Thank you so much. Pro Vice Chancellor for Sport, Professor Jo Maher, Director of the Institute of Advanced Studies, Professor Chimutina, International Special Envoys on Sub-Saharan Africa, and Summit Leads, Professor Afolabi and Dr. O'Shea Kwasi. Academic and industry experts within the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences, distinguished panel members, guests, partners, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's so good to be here with you today, this morning at the first ever Loughborough University Africa Research Summit. Sport has incredible intrinsic power. As you know, the great Nelson Mandela said, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to unite in a way that little else does. It speaks to the youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. Wearing my Commonwealth hat, we have long recognized the value of sport as a powerful vehicle for socioeconomic good, cultural and political change. 21 of our 56 sovereign and independent member states are from Africa. They bear both advanced economies and developing countries. Our sport for development and peace agenda has always been at the forefront of discourse and how we effectively harness sport for human development. For us, sport is more than games. It's more than competition and entertainment. It comes down to multi-sectoral partnerships, just what was mentioned right now. The kind of networks that we form in conversation that promote health and well-being in a unique and wonderful way. The kind of conversations and networks that foster peace and inclusion, that spark ideas around economic growth. These, we believe, are the core ingredients in delivering a successful sport for development and peace policy and program. Drawing on today's theme of the African continent and its sporting landscape, I think it's quite apt that I speak to the African Union policy for sustainable development of sport in Africa. A policy framework that I believe stands as an exemplar for other regional sports policies. The AU sports policy articulates how do we best articulate, it makes us question, how do we best articulate and harness the full power of sport to drive transformational change? And how this is then progressive and helpful in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. To fully appreciate the efforts that have been made in establishing this policy that I dare say is an exemplar, we must consider its journey. The first policy on the AU Sustainable Development of Sports in Africa was put in place in 2008. In 2018, a decade later, the AU started what they called a robust policy revision process. It had ministries responsible for sports, athlete representatives from Africa, organizations of the African sports movement, and that included Olympic, Paralympic, and Special Olympics, women in sports, sport for development and peace organizations, and institutions of higher learning. This was then followed by an extensive peer review process where these experts in sport and development, policy development, where the Commonwealth was privileged to be a part of, came together to validate the ideas and ideals that were set forth. Finally, in September 2022, this policy was adopted at the fourth ordinary session of the Specialized Technical Committee on Youth, Culture and Sport. The AU Sport Policy for Sustainable Development of Sport in Africa draws boldly from Agenda 2063, aspirations for the Africa we want. What are these aspirations? I'll share some of them with you. These aspirations call for a prosperous Africa, one based on inclusive growth and sustainable development, an integrated continent, politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism, an Africa of good governance, politically united, and one that upholds justice and rule of law, a peaceful and secure Africa, an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values and ethics, an Africa whose development is people-driven and whose potential is realized for its women, youth, and caring for its children. Finally, these values of the Africa we want stand on an Africa that is strong, united, and stands as an influential global player and partner. There's opportunities in that statement alone, in those ideals alone, for the university and for all of us in the room to integrate and network and utilize this. But to support the achievement of these golden aspirations, there are 5 pillars that stand within the AU sports policy that I mentioned earlier, the one that took a decade to recognize. Number 1 is an active Africa. What is an active Africa? In this AU policy, it's one that promotes health, well-being, physical activity, lifestyles through policies and programs that ensure sports for all. An active Africa is one where institutional sports and recreation work hard to provide safe and inclusive spaces. A great example that I can draw on from the African continent is the FAME Foundation program in Nigeria. FAME has a Play It, Dream It girl empowerment program, and since 2019 has worked hard to directly impact 1,724 girls and indirectly work with over 7,000 young people who are in internally displaced camps. FAME Foundation focuses on the girl child, but more importantly, uses education as a tool to improve overall health and well-being. At the national level, Mauritius stands as a beacon of hope for the African continent. It's the first nation in Africa to integrate the measurement of sports and health indicators within its national monitoring and evaluation system. The government, what this means is that the government can understand areas in which sport is making a very viable positive impact to society. And the result of that is it leads to a healthier nation, happier communities, and stronger citizens. Moreover, Mauritius saw that the benefits of sport were so apparent that they cultivated what we call the National Active Mauritius Framework that allows sports to meaningfully contribute to social cohesion, economic development, and health. In other words, this deals with SDG 3.4, where it addresses the premature mortality of NCDs. How do we prevent that? At the global level, I'd like to mention the Commonwealth Youth NCD Guiding Framework that was launched by the First Lady of Zanzibar, which emphasizes interventions of youth and how we can use physical education, physical activity, and sport to promote health and well-being. So really, sport must be an investment in people. Governments, private organizations, and development banks will work hard to allocate resources to infrastructure and programs if it is clear that we are showing the investment in people. At the 7th International Conference of Ministers Responsible for Sport, in which some of our colleagues from Loughborough, we were all there together, UNESCO, together with Commonwealth and other global stakeholders, including Loughborough, worked to launch a data dashboard that tracks sports contribution to development outcomes such as health and education. By creating this accountability framework, we hope to attract more investment in sport, which can transform lives of communities, not only in Africa, but across the globe. So this stands for the first ideal. Number 2 is a winning Africa. This is one in which policies promote inclusive elite and grassroots long-term coach and athlete development. It includes the training of technical officials and sports administrators. It values the development of facilities and the equipment of legal and the development of legal frameworks that protect athletes. Examples here include the GAPS program that stands to Gather, Adjust, Prepare, and Sustain by the Commonwealth Games Federation. It's designed to support the development of inclusive sport pathways, and a real example here being the work that they did in 2022 in South Africa, where African athletes and coaches got to, from Malawi, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, were able to be trained across a broad range of sports, inclusive sports, and to challenge the ways of thinking, adapting, and ultimately winning in sport. At a legislative level, the voice of the African athlete continues to rise, with the model law provisions that aim to protect vulnerable persons against abuse by people in positions of trust, not just in sport, but related fields. In Kenya, where I'm from, in honor of the late 2015 World Cross Country Champion Agnes Tirop, athletes gathered to tackle different forms of gender-based violence that athletes endure. It was under the motto of Silence No More, and a sign of a new beginning in the sports ecosystem, where the welfare of women athletes, young women athletes, was taken care of. So Winning Africa is one that strengthens safeguarding across all sports and protects and promotes mental health and well-being. Third is a sustainable Africa, one where policies and programs promote inclusive rights-based sports approaches. At the grassroots level, Ability Sports Africa, a Ugandan non-profit organization, uses adaptive equipment and games to create a creative platform as a platform for social inclusion. What is unique about the Ability Sports Africa, or ASA, for example, for short, is that they use what they call reverse inclusion, an approach where youth and children with disabilities are empowered to take on full responsibilities. These children conduct inclusive activities together with different teammates that focus on sport, plays, and adaptive games. The result? More confident and engaged children and youth who are ready to realize their full potential in their schools and communities. And these communities that have been part and parcel of this process are also bearing no social stigma or societal stigma and discrimination for these young people. At a Pan-African level, the vision of the Sustainable Africa is promoted through the Africa Traditional Sports and Games Council that officially designated Namibia to host the inaugural Africa Traditional Sports and Games in 2026. This first-of-a-kind event will celebrate Africa's rich cultural heritage through traditional sports and games, and the games will be designed to showcase not only athletic talent, but the diverse cultural identities and traditions of Africa. Participants will present various traditional games that reflect the unique customs of the regions they're from. Fourth is an innovative Africa that includes innovation around sports and sporting systems that promotes good governance and good governance, funding, and all these being in line with African Union and international conventions. It is based on the understanding that our sports movement must be innovative. Africa understands that we must embrace new technologies of AI, virtual reality, wearable devices that revolutionize how we engage with sport, and we must embrace out-of-the-box thinking. It's no secret, there's still a massive digital divide, but that has not stopped the ambition to ensure that Africa is innovative and secure and moving in that direction. Digital skills training, for example, is now and must continue to be an integral part of sports development. We've already seen success with the African Union operating the first hybrid massive open online course on sports and the SDGs, which to date has over 8,350 learners globally through the International Platform on Sport and Development. On the same Sport for Development platform, there are 3,000 plus, sorry, there are over 300, 3,000 is an exaggeration. There are 300 plus registered sports organizations from Africa. What this for me signals is that there's a real appetite for sport and sport for development, and that together we can continue to work towards driving societal change. Let me give another example of a country such as Rwanda, which has been very clever in innovatively considering sport as a lever for mobilizing the private sector. Rwanda, many years ago, set up Kigali as a global visibility hub, a place where, for example, in 2018, they decided, how will we attract more people into our capital? So Arsenal Gunners have been wearing the slogan, Visit Rwanda, on their sleeve. What that's done is, it has drawn people, it has drawn both online and physical traffic to the country. In 2025, Rwanda will host the World Road Cycling Championships, a first major sport event intended to promote potential and talents. This African nation has also already hosted several continental competitions, including the inaugural session on Basketball with the Basketball Africa League from 2021, and now it's in its fourth consecutive season. The BK Arena, or the Kigali Arena, is well placed and respected as a high-level showcase of what is to come, a forerunner for what Africa has to offer. So Rwanda has successfully supported this ambitious project, and as a result, offered spaces for sport to prosper on the continent. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, is a united Africa, an Africa in which sport is seen as inclusive, an Africa with hope, social cohesion, inclusion, safeguarding, and social transformation at its heart. One that develops policies that mainstream gender equality and respect fundamental human rights. Everyone, regardless of gender, race, age, or ability, should have access to the benefits of sport. Sport in Africa has to be accessible for it to be inclusive. The AU Sports Policy for Sustainable Sport in Africa advocates for this protection of vulnerable populations. By promoting diversity and safeguarding of the vulnerable, sport can then challenge the prejudice and build more inclusive societies. But this will not happen in a silo. In order for us to uphold integrity, to combat corruption, and to set a good example for future generations, Africa understands that it is important that rules matter, and that it is important that they matter most in times of crisis and conflict. Initiatives such as the Friendship Games that take place in Burundi illustrate how sport can serve as a force for unity in the Africa Great Lakes region, and how it can promote peace in conflict situations. So, what does all this mean? How do we, in and outside of this summit, actively engage and harness the power of sport in our communities? Having set the frame for the continent, let me share a personal story. As part of my research on the role of sports to prevent violent extremism, I had the opportunity to travel to very different and varied locations in Africa, but mostly in my country, Kenya and Somalia, neighboring Somalia. Once I found myself in a police truck traveling through the infamous what they call Boni Forest, where the policeman that was driving us, I asked him, where is this location they call Boni Forest? He said, oh, we're driving right through it at the moment. And he said, you know, it's a day in, day out. You're not sure. There may be an IUD that will, you know, blast us off the ground. But what I want you to take away from it is it has not stopped us from working with the communities in Kiunga, for example. It's the same research that I had the opportunity to take a 2-hour journey speedboat to reach these destinations, and then a further truck ride to these communities. And in arriving there, met with suspicion, but also warmth. I was shown the resilience of the community by the young people. They still participated in sports every day, irrespective of the challenges and the real threat of the Al-Shabaab terrorist network being within proximity. Seeing the impact of terror and this varied, marginalized space, I got to witness firsthand the power of sport. I also got to witness the challenges and the barriers to participation in sport. Young women and girls were not on the playing field. There were no spaces that were curated for them or facilities that ensured that they were participating. But people had gotten creative. Instead of sport, then there was the use of other locally empowering approaches, such as skits that were more inclusive for people and for different genders. Africa, we want rallies on Agenda 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, we're 40 years shy of 2063. So if we do the math in this room and online, who are we really raising this impact for? It's for those young people who show up on the field with or without facilities, and for many others around the world that we know of. Our research and our actions must be bold, and they must dare to move the dial forward. We must work together to provide infrastructure. We must work together to address the importance of data. We cannot research in silos. We must work together to address this real barrier. Policies need to be designed that work towards a joined-up approach. The Global Sport and SDG Impact Report will be a global baseline, something that has tried its best to summarize all that is going on across the world of sport at a policy level to ensure that young people get, and governments, the people who have the decision makers, are able to understand and value the power of sport, but beyond that are able to also understand the cost, the physical cost of inactivity, are able to appreciate how investing in sport means greater facilities, means another chance for a young person who does not have those opportunities. Seeing the power of sports from the grassroots level all the way to academia, to practitioner, and now policy, it's clear to me, and I'm sure to a lot of you in the room, that we all need each other, that we're all in this together. This vision of sport for development and peace matters because it directly addresses some of today's greatest challenges: conflict, crime, non-communicable diseases, mental health crises. So we can engage by identifying some of the greatest challenges in our communities and see how sport is already making an impact. We can actively participate in enhancing the transformation that's being delivered at these sports programs. Sport can help to heal societies, but it can't do it alone. We've seen it with the 2010 FIFA World Cup and how it electrified the atmosphere. We've also seen it with the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations and the All Africa Game qualifiers. 2026 is on the horizon with the Youth Olympic Games in Dakar. It will be yet another platform for the Africa voice and the African youth to showcase what Africa has to offer, its vibrancy and its people. But together we must work together to achieve this. So ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I wish to humbly remind you that when all is said and done, in every sense of the word, we are all sportsmen and women. We're all chasing goals and fighting for our dreams. We're all striving to cross that finish line, whether it be the SDGs, Agenda 2063, or whatever personal or professional aspirations you might have. And so, wherever you are in the track of life, please take a moment to reflect on how far you've come and how hard you worked. Take a moment to thank those who passed the torch on to you and those who wait their turn to run. Do all you can do when you can do what you do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lynn. Great to see you again.
Great to see you again.
You certainly haven't, a tremendous keynote and also some memories of your PhD and some of the interesting places you got to, which I wasn't fully aware of as supervisor, but very well done on that. Actually, I was going to maybe open this up to maybe if there's any quick questions or comments that anyone would like to make in relation to Lynn's keynote before we move on to the next part. So, yeah, we have some questions back.
It's so interesting listening to it. Thank you very much. So I work for World Boccia. So those that don't know, Boccia is Paralympic sport, a bit like bowls where you throw balls towards a target ball. So we were really lucky. We had funding from the IPC to run coach and workforce development courses in both Africa and the Caribbean. And lots of engagement from countries. But I just wanted to ask your advice because one of our big issues were around kind of timescales. So say for example, really practical stuff like trying to get interested parties to book flights, to make sure they had time to get visas. And it was a shame because there's so many countries were interested, but because they didn't book the flights, they didn't start the visa process, they then couldn't attend. And it's just if you've got any advice on how to kind of support countries in doing things in an adequate timescale.
That's really helpful. That's a great question and a real barrier there. A real barrier to participation that needs to be addressed. When we talk about mobility for the African, there are very clear very real barriers. You need a letter, you need an invitation letter, you need a visa, you need a Schengen visa, you need to move to share your story for it to be amplified. There's a number of items that you need to tick off. My advice around encouraging participation is to perhaps work directly with the governments and or quasi partners that can support that. So for example, I'm sure you've already provided invitation letters and already provided, incentives for visa. But working with the high commissioners, for example, or working with, for example, this would based on the location. If it's England, then it would be the British High Commission, for example, and ensuring that pathway. But I think that's short term. Long term, we need to look at how do we remove these barriers to participation, and to sharing of voice and stories. Another way around it is to go in country for now, but really to challenge and to work with, is it specifically the African region that you've had these challenges with?
Yes, to be fair, we've only worked with we've only had the funding from the IPC to work with the African. and the course of shape sampling African region was in Egypt.
In Egypt.
So they weren't having to go outside of Africa, but obviously there's still visa issues. And the Caribbean, it was Caribbean and South America, so it was in Cali in Colombia. But then some participants from the Caribbean had to fly via America to get the visas, and even just flights with sometimes ridiculous, number of changes.
Yeah.
Actually, it's really interesting your point about working with people like the High Commissions, because I've very much been working with the individuals that were going to come on the call.
Oh, no. Yeah. No. You can support them, you can make sure they get there by working with the liaison officers. So we're happy to have a conversation around that. But what we do at the Secretariat, because we have this challenge as well. So you organize a meeting and you want member states to come from different regions. They need a note verbal, they need a supporting letter, they need the High Commissioner to be notified. It helps to work with the government. It kind of obstructs that process, surprisingly. And beyond that, then I think it's a big challenge that needs to be addressed. Traveling within not just the continent is extremely expensive. In Europe, it's the complete opposite. You can hop on a flight and be in Amsterdam tomorrow. I mean, before lunch. But for other regions, even the Caribbean, for example, it's just ridiculously expensive to move. And so how are we going to promote trade? With trade routes, they have started conversations with Afriemzing Bank, for example, I know, to ensure that those portals for discussion and transport are being addressed. But I would say working with the High Commissions is a really good start. Happy to share what's worked for us, but and starting early and encouraging them to have a liaison desk officer. That's really good. Hope that helps.
That's great, thank you so much.
You're
I hadn't
welcome.
thought of going higher, so that's really useful, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments, questions? Okay, well, I guess we'll move on to the next part here. I should have introduced myself. For those who don't know me, I'm Richard Giulianotti. I lead the UNESCO chair here at Leicester University, also Professor of Sociology, and I've had a recurring research interest in Africa, and undertaken some research there in different parts as well. So in this next session, we've got two further contributors, so maybe inviting them to join us, Janneth and John. I think Lee, you're.
Oh, sorry, all
Yeah, the session we have here is on integrating sports. The title of it is Integrating Sports with National Health Programmes, examining policy, sustainable sport facility infrastructure, and community impact. And I guess before we really get kicked off, I'd like to suggest that we keep quite a wide definition of what sport is. So we can obviously think of, formal, established modern sports, football, cricket, rugby union, etc. We would also be thinking of more maybe informal types of sport, maybe traditional games and play, also physical education, and other types of activities related to that. I might even broaden it to activities in which sports organisations also engage in wider activities, maybe for development purposes. And Lynn mentioned skits, which she identified as a research focus. So it shows that there's actually a wider range of ways of engaging young people for development purposes, including health. So keep that broad definition in mind, perhaps. My suggestion would be that we would have short presentations or introductions by each panelist in terms of the work that they're doing, and then we can open that up to the audience for some comments or questions. And then I have some specific questions which have been formulated, and we can present these to the panelists as well for their thoughts and comments. So I think we'll start with John, will we?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with John. So John, if you want to introduce yourself and let us know what you're doing and what your main activities are in relation to this topic.
Good, I was going to say good afternoon, but good morning to everyone. Thank you for having me here. So my name is Olaleye. Currently, I am the Diversity and Inclusion Lead for Leicester City Football Club, having worked there for just over 4 years, so coming up to 5 in the new year. In short, my role involves driving inclusion across the football club. So that will mean from legal, I might have meetings with legal and hospitality, right through to the men's playing staff, the medical side, as well as the women's team. Really what we're trying to ensure around that is that there is equality for all, whether that's accessing football at high level or participation level. Prior to that, I've worked at Arsenal Football Club for a number of years, and then progressed into UK Sport, working as part of their international development team. So quite a broad range when it comes to sport and development, but right now my focus is football in the main. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Janneth.
Okay, so good morning, everybody, and it is indeed my pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Janneth Mghamba. I'm a medical doctor by profession, and I think I'm in the right place hearing the keynote address and also hearing the introduction. There is a very big connection between sports, health, and well-being. And I work in the Commonwealth Secretariat as a health advisor. Prior to joining the Secretariat, I used to work in the Ministry of Health in Tanzania. We did have a number of attempts to collaborate between sports, health, and it had been at that particular time a challenge. We somehow, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually shaped the way sports, physical activity, and health should be really be focused. And somehow, many countries, also within the Commonwealth, countries are looking on how to have policies which have both integrated sports, health, and well-being. Within the Secretariat, our main area of focus, because we have 56 countries, they are really very diverse in terms of the culture, in terms of the advancement in economy. We have got a wider digital divide. So we have also very high burden of non-communicable disease. So really looking on how we can integrate sports and health and well-being as a cornerstone. I will be speaking around a number of initiatives of which we're working together with Lynn. And I really look forward to have a wider conversation and how we could really work together. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Janneth. Good morning again, everybody. My name is Dr Sambili-Gicheha. The advisor sports for development and peace within the Commonwealth Secretariat. I've been with the Secretariat now 4 years, hard to believe. Initially as a project manager, now as advisor. And what we exist to do really is to support our member countries to maximize the contribution that sports has towards achieving their national sports policies, the development policies, and at a global level to achieve the sustainable development goals. We're shy of 5 years to achieve these, but looking beyond 2030 as well, it will be very crucial to ensure that sport is seen as an enabler for inclusive and resilient societies. So that's part of the work that we do. We work in a very integrated manner within the sports, education, as part of the wider social policy team. So that's the health colleagues, education, youth, and gender is mainstreamed across. So what that means is that on a day-to-day basis, we would have sight of projects that the gender team are doing, that the youth team are moving forward, and education as well. And beyond just sharing, not just sharing budgets, but also sharing ideas on how we can strengthen the delivery in country. So it's really unique and very nimble and really a really exciting space to work in.
Thanks. Yeah, indeed, thanks, Lynn. I suppose just briefly before we move on to open up to the audience, in terms of the homework that I've done in this area, I suggest maybe 2 dimensions. One is certainly the sport development piece area, which has become a a very big research field in an area of activity, going back maybe at least to 2005, with the UN making that year its International Year of Sport and Physical Education. I've been PI on 2 ESRC funded research projects, looking at sports development piece in different locations, and both have included African settings, so I've been internationally comparative. Just really looking at how sport can be used to promote different types of development. Health's in there, certainly. Also, think of areas such as gender equality, and also kind of post-conflict situations as well. So peace building, I would say peace building too as well, which has definitely got obviously direct consequences for health. The second element, I suppose, is through the UNESCO chair that I'm leading, and there's several participants, members in the room here who are also part of the team with different contributions to it. The main thing that UNESCO are pursuing through in relation to sport is this Fit for Life programme, which is well, using sport, physical education, games, play, etc., as a way of reaching, engaging young people to promote their health and well-being in large part, and sustainable livelihoods, etc. You know, in terms of their kind of global long-term development. So there's significant focus on Africa. I mean, UNESCO do have this double strategic focus on Africa and on gender equality. So I might ask you in particular about the gender dimensions of the work that's going on there. And so anyway, Fit for Life runs for another 7 or 8 years, and ideally it's really a driver through sport physical education to pursue the development goals, SDGs, and health being a key one. So anyway, just open this up to further, if there's any questions, further comments that you might have from the initial contributions.
Not a question, just a comment from Mauritius. I'm very happy that you mentioned that Mauritius has been taking part in the SDGs, because I've been a policymaker for Cambridge for futsal design, and I work in sport as well, where we promote a lot of sports. So I would be looking forward to mention yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, you did take us in quite a tour of Africa.
I did. I mean, it's a very broad topic. I think it would be helpful to spotlight where it's working.
Indeed. Okay, well, I'll delve into the questions then, and just a gentle one to start with. Not really. The first question we have is, what are the key policy, social and economic factors that shape the future of sports, health and well-being in both local and global contexts?
That is not a software. Social factors, yeah. Shall we start? Because what we're going to try and do is tag team.
Okay, yeah, right.
Okay, we're going to try and tag team from a secretariat perspective. Sorry, John.
That's right.
But we need to showcase how we're doing our best to do a joined up approach.
Yeah.
So socioeconomic factors that really are influencing the landscape of sport. Number one, I guess we could start with COVID-19. The pandemic was really a pivotal moment for us in terms of considering how do we integrate sport and health outcomes towards building more resilient societies. Premature mortality from NCDs is a leading cause of death and mortality in the Commonwealth. So, for example, in member countries such as St. Kitts and Nevis, we found that 80% of mortality rates were due to NCDs, for example. And so that's shaped how we ensure partnership and work between the sports and the health ministry. Physical activity, physical education and sport are prioritized in and out of school programs. But also that feeds into the policy and the work that we request them to look at. So that's the first one, but I'll let Janneth also add on to that point.
Just to build on the COVID-19, I think we are kind of really seeing there is an increase in health awareness among the community. And the fact that we have the rising burden of the non-communicable disease and the interlink between NCDs and physical activity somehow it is an opportunity. It is really an opportunity to have an integrated approach in terms of looking physical activity and wellness and health. And just to build on what Lena said, within the Commonwealth Secretariat, we have developed an Commonwealth NCD guidance framework, which really focuses on young people. The Commonwealth Secretariat, if you don't know, 60% of our 2.2 billion people are young people. And we're really worried. If you look on the data in terms of the NCD risk factors, obesity, we are seeing a pattern which is really alarming. And our NCD guidance framework has actually been developed focusing on physical activity and healthy diets. We did launch that framework last year, and I think we're riding on the fact that this is really an opportunity. People are they're aware of the link between NCD and physical activity, and somehow the guidance framework is an opportunity. We will be going to the East, Central, and Southern Africa to anchor that framework within the region, within the Africa. So the African region is the first region of which we feel that we need to anchor that. So we want really to ride on that. I think the other aspect is the digital transformation, and we are seeing within the Secretariat, within the family of the 36 countries, there is really a diverse in terms of access to the digital tools. It's indeed an opportunity, but we have devised some mechanism. We have some consortium within the Commonwealth Secretariat where there are champion countries like India, really transforming that kind of information and transfer that information to the African region. So we are also looking at the opportunity of having, how can we really potentially accelerate that connection using the digital platform and transformation. So the Secretariat is already working on that. We have an AI consortium. We are working with countries. We are providing an exchange platform where countries actually could learn between each other and override and look on how to use the digital transformation to actually address both sports, health, and well-being.
Say Lynn and Janneth have said it all, but just I suppose to add to it from I'll speak from a footballing perspective. Off the back of COVID-19, again, it's highlighted many sort of disparities that we have within the game. A big one for us is around gender equality across football. So there's been a massive piece of work, especially within the WSL. Where sponsorship has now come in, and that is only going to drive not just the profile but the growth of the game at sort of a grassroots level, so that the knock-on effect becomes a global effect in terms of the international draw that we get from across the world. I think that the big piece for us is, as a football club, is not only what we do within our own space, but what's really important is recognising the influence that has on the health and well-being factors of people within Leicester and Leicestershire. So we're not just, if you like, we're not just penned into football, but recognising that there are other areas and ways that we can, as a football club, that we can ensure that health and well-being is a high priority, gender equality is a high priority, but not just creating those spaces, but also creating opportunities for development and for growth. So again, a big one for us is specifically around the women's game. We recognise, although as a football club, we recently, if you like, we brought in the women's team into the football club, and what that was is to create a one club mentality where we don't have the separation of women and men, but there is an element of we're in this together. We are also, in terms of the women's football club, they're the only football club in the WSL that has a dedicated training ground, and that in itself might sound really small, but in the football world is huge. So they have their own facility that they can use, but also what that does, we then provide additional sports and activities for girls and women within the locality of Leicester and Leicestershire to be able to be inspired by those women who are playing football at a high level.
Great, thanks. Okay, any thoughts, initial comments on this?
Not a comment, it's just a comment. It's for everybody. In Africa, there are 30 countries that outlaw homosexuality. And when we think of an athlete, we think of a male or female that is heterosexual and mostly white, but now of course black bodies are included in the image. If we are serious about inclusivity in countries, and I come from South Africa, so let me talk about the African continent, how do we include the LGBTIQ community? And why has organizations, including many organizations that all of us work with and have partnerships with, I mean, we know that they are quiet or silent on the issue of LGBTQI plus community. And we cannot say, and we don't accept the argument that it's un-African. Homosexuality has been institutionalized in African countries for forever. It's been outlawed as a result of colonial laws. But how do we stand here or sit in a room over here and talk about inclusivity, marginalized groupings, and we are silent on the issue of a community that in certain countries in Africa and in other places in the world face the death penalty, long sentences in jail, or your identity is criminalized by just being who you are.
Yeah, very good question. Comments?
I will attempt to answer it. So just speaking from an organizational standpoint, there's the Commonwealth consensus on promoting human rights in and through sport. And that was a major factor that was discussed. And how it was rounded off is it must be inclusive for all. And that ensured that different member countries were able to appreciate progressively and really discuss in genuine kindness the different layers of society and ensure that everybody was getting access to sport. A practical example is with the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. It was openly welcomed. These discussions around ensuring every athlete, regardless of their sex and gender, were included and welcomed into the games. So it is. You're right in saying that it's something that organizations and people have shied away from, but we cannot. We must, if we're saying sport is for all, then truly it must be for all. And at a policy level, this Commonwealth Consensus document that I speak to was endorsed by all the Commonwealth member states and covers an umbrella of the different rights of different people from different societies and different segments of society. So different subcultures have also been captured in there and mentioned appropriately as I could say. But I'm happy to share more information with you on a one-to-one as well, and also to circulate the documentation that's there. We still have a long way to go. I appreciate that, but strides have been made to ensure with, for example, the 10 guiding actions, the inclusiveness and the call for all was included communities of the LGBTQI plus community. It included young people, it included athlete voice in that very respectful way. So that's my 2 cents in pushing this agenda forward, because it's for all of us. If we're not all, we should not be leaving anyone behind. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the question to your question, how do we include? In the immediate, football clubs, the 92 across the league, we work hard to create safe spaces for people to attend games. And I think that for us is a start. I always ask, and then I move on to the question and ask, and not as an out, but is football ready to make that clear stand? And it's a question I often ask, given the work that I'm in and the work that we're currently working on. Given the history of football and given the if you like, the picture that is painted from the past, you know, you look at your stereotypical football fan, and I'm sure everyone will probably, you know, 9 times out of 10 will probably have the same image in our head. Does that capture diversity from a visual perspective? Probably it doesn't. So therefore, we're not fully having the conversations in those spaces. And I think from a wider piece, when we look across the league, the work that we are doing is there's far more collaboration, but there's far more openness to begin these discussions. And that's why I asked the question, are we ready? Because I think there's still an education that needs to take place to allow and enable people to create an understanding of how do we create not just safe spaces, but proper safe spaces for people from these communities to be able to attend football games safely and openly and honestly, without discrimination, without fear of being attacked. So currently, I can't go into too much detail, but we're currently working on a piece within the LGBTQ plus community with our fans group. So over the coming weeks, but also over the coming year, we hope to again just elevate our conversation, but also put our head above the parapet a little bit in terms of this is where we stand, that football is for all. No one should feel unsafe attending football, and we welcome everyone and anyone, regardless of age, race, gender, sexuality, orientation, or faith.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of thoughts from me on this. One, at the policy level, I mean, UNESCO's got its International Charter of Sport, Physical Activity and Physical Education. Article 1, Section 1, line 1, as it were, sets out that everyone has the right to participate in these areas, irrespective of, and it's got the list and it includes sexuality. But I have been to UNESCO meetings where this has been contested by some member states in terms of having this statement included in some subsequent resolutions or agreements. UNESCO highlight this by still maintaining reference to this paragraph, but parts not in order to get these resolutions through, not necessarily listing all the wording as it were. So there are these difficult policy environments in which this issue is still it's established, it's fundamental to UNESCO in terms of what it does sport-wise, but it's still chipped away at by certain countries. But it's still in place. So that's an ongoing struggle to ensure that that's fully recognised, but also fully implemented. The second side, so there is that kind of policy context, there is that kind of support for it. And the second side, I suppose, is to think of other struggles, which have gone on in sport over several decades, perhaps, where some progress has been made. There has been, greater levels of social inclusion and recognition take place. So I think of the anti-racism work that's gone on in the UK over several decades. I go back to the 70s and the early 80s when the racist abuse that players used to receive was appalling. And really appalling, and it was the same, for those spectators who were in attendance. And so, what drove the change? I didn't think it came from the top. It came more from the bottom, from the civil society, from the players themselves, but also engaging and shaming those higher up to make the changes. But also other groups. You could call it kind of social, fan movements, fan groups, for example, those who are kind of part of the wider spectrum of those in the civil society level, to be part of the movement to pursue change. So there needs to be kind of that solidarity, if you like, from the wider groups, but also that kind of keeping the pressure on in terms of sharing the authorities and those with influence to make the changes, and that includes therefore the type of kind of partnerships that they make within sport, and how they move forward on that. Just there's some thoughts there, but in theory at least, the kind of policies are in place to kind of facilitate that. We didn't necessarily have that in the 70s or 80s with some of the the initial anti-racism movements that were starting. So just my initial thoughts on that. Any comments from any further comments? I mean, also in relation to the comments, the initial statements from the colleagues here, and also in relation to the first question. Yeah, at the back.
Just to think it's a really useful question because at World Watcher and a lot of other Paralympic athletic federations, we're currently sort of looking at the gender issues, a big thing, obviously after the Paris Games, and so in Boccia, until Paris it was a mix, so men and women just competed against each other. So at least that there's no issues then about gender identity and so forth. However, by splitting the genders, we then have more women's participation in the games, which is good. So I guess for us, kind of we're, and a lot of other sports are needing to sort of write policies on transgender participation and binary participation. Is there anything from, obviously I've kind of lived in the UK, worked in the UK all my life, so I'm kind of aware of, I guess, issues and nuances in this country. In terms of sort of transgender and non-binary inclusion at the elite level, is there any insights from anything we can touch be aware of from an African perspective that might be different from, say, more European perspective?
Africa, yeah, no, so what I would say is the Center for Sports and Human Rights, I don't know if you've heard of them. The Center for Sports and Human Rights are working collectively with a lot of member countries, particularly those who are, if you were to think of it as a traffic light system, really, those who've progressed, those who are in the medium, and those who have no legislation or provisions to protect those who may require the protection or that their voices are heard. The Center for Sports and Human Rights are kind of like the mouthpiece for sport on very salient issues, very everyday, present, modern issues around policy, and they have a wide range of stakeholders. We are part of those stakeholders and different voices where we critique, okay, what is the sports movement going to say when it comes to certain cases of ensuring transgender and further inclusion of everyone. So I would pinpoint you to them, happy to facilitate an introduction as well. They have very useful quarterly updates on what's happening in the world of sport, and don't shy to go there and to critique what would be the solution here and who do we need to have in the room. So that's an organization I would definitely say.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. Sorry,
You're
I'm
welcome.
just taking advantage of
Okay.
just sort of ask
This
everyone
is a really great question. No, absolutely, it's fine.
Right, thanks. Let me move on to the next question then we've got. So it's about stakeholders and the roles and how they can, the different stakeholders can collaborate in order to ensure lasting impact and sustainability in relation to sports, health and well-being. So these stakeholders might include, for example, government, private sector, civil society, local communities. Any thoughts on how that collaboration can be effective and have those impacts in relation to sport, health and well-being? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think within the Commonwealth Secretariat it's an organization which for me is best placed for convening various stakeholders. We have various platforms. For us, the biggest platform is the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, where if a head of government really says something, then somehow it trickles down. So we use that platform and avenue. We had concluded actually the meeting in Samoa, and we had also within the communique, which the heads of government have actually said, there is a very big emphasis on collaboration between, first of all, member countries, but then also collaboration between the Commonwealth Secretariat with other organizations. We are working very closely, for instance, with our colleagues, from the World Health Organization. And this is a partnership. We have an MOU which speaks around how can we foster and leverage resources and expertise within various organizations. And it is really very important because we have found no actor can actually have a comprehensive approach. So there are various ways in the Secretariat where we are leveraging that kind of an aspect. We're also working within the health arena. We have the Commonwealth Advisory Health Committee, which is really very unique in a way that their voices actually from CSOs. I was listening very carefully about the previous discussion. We incorporate voices from CSOs and also accredited organizations. We have professional organizations. We do develop joint plans, and we are leveraging the expertise across various organizations within the Secretariat. There is also very strong relationships with the Commonwealth Games Federation. We are now kind of working on a work plan to realize how we can work together. So I think leveraging on various platforms within the Commonwealth Secretariat has actually assisted us very well in terms of looking on how an integrated approach can be realized. It's very easy to speak around an integration, but then how can you really realize that kind of integration is an area where, for me, the Secretariat stands a chance. We do participate, for instance, like our health team do participate in the sports meeting. We craft together the policies, and I think this is really a start. We know we're supposed to go now beyond the policies into the actual implementation. And we have also country examples, and Lynn can share some of the country examples of where we have already kind of bring various partners to address sports, health, and well-being.
Absolutely. I've mentioned, someone said that from the Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis have a very robust national sports policy and clear work plans on how they would implement it. But what was lacking is, we said, hang on, you need to work with your health. If 80% mortality is due to NCDs, and you have all these amazing facilities in your country, just the infrastructure there for sport and sport participation is so well placed, and sports tourism, etc. But we said, why isn't the health ministry here? So we need to ensure you have the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Community Development, all these people, all these stakeholders. As part of our technical assistance, we're able to bring everybody into the room, which was so magical, because then you have colleagues who would otherwise not integrate or interface, really saying, look, this is why you need to support me. This is what it means for the young people of, say, Kitts and Nevis participating in sport. Definitions were addressed around physical education, physical activity, and sport, for example, and going on over the broad umbrella of, if we have healthy citizens, then we have a stronger nation. And so that's St. Kitts and Nevis is this ongoing work now, which is really exciting, because we say we're coming in with technical assistance, but we're also learning from the country, because they've created greater ownership of this policy, because we've helped them to place different sports officials and health officials and education colleagues to meet regularly on this sort of a roadmap on how are we going to address NCDs. And it was a really good case study, in the sense that it was not just at the policy government level, but also the Special Olympics were involved. Community coaches came to say, what's this about this national sports policy? Did you get my views on this? And critique it, really unpack it and make it their own. So that moving forward, we see that it's important that base level of ownership is taken up. And that's the real opportunity here, that we are not celebrating what's happening at the grassroots level here, but we're ensuring that the money is coming there, that we're ensuring the the decision-making involves all these voices and all these actors across the place. There's also the Gambia, and they're taking on a similar approach, and also including, they've put their hand up and said, hang on, we know there's the digital divide, but we would like to be part of the AI consortium. We'd like to test whether we can include technology in our national sports policy and in our work really practically, in a really real way. So yeah, those are some examples I can think of. Namibia, I mean, I won't take you across the tour of the continent again, but it is there, and yeah, that's our stock.
Thank you. John, examples?
I was just going to say, and then Janneth mentioned just around sort of the base level, moving from, I think for us, what's really important, and again, an area that we're trying to drive is move from consultation to co-creation. So really creating an opportunity for individuals to have a voice, but also a voice that has impact. I think that's really, really important. We can talk about, bring them to the table. Actually, people listening to what they are saying, but also is what they're saying being heard, listened to, and being implemented. So I think you guys have mentioned it around that, and for me, it really ensures sustainability in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but also long-term impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. There's a lot in those answers. Thank you so much. Just one or two thoughts, if I want to maybe ask you to follow up, perhaps. The M word, money. Funding these initiatives, and so how, what kind of partnerships are key for facilitating that? And I mean, you mentioned the linking with the health ministry, for example. I mean, that's obviously central for tackling diseases, etc. But also for maybe getting more funding from government, because the sports minister's away at the end of the table.
That's right.
The health minister's a little bit nearer, the big decision makers. So
The finance minister at the end.
yeah. So that, but also external, funders, maybe investment funds, private banks. I mean, how do you kind of get the message across that this is a smart investment, that you put money in and you get more in return? Not immediately, but you do in terms of maybe health savings, employability of young people, etc.
I think it's around changing the way you communicate what you're doing.
Yeah.
You can't hit them with policy and this is what we're doing, this is how this will work, but really giving the facts and the figures. For example, the cost of inactivity is costing you X amount of per dollar, the dollar quotient, or this is the return on investment.
Yes.
If you put in £5 million into this project, then that's increased, an increased output for you. And I think UNESCO, correct me if I'm wrong, they have the social outcomes contract model.
Yes.
That looks at, kind of putting a bid forward and telling a country, telling a development bank, invest in this initiative for the next 5 years, and this is the return on investment, track it.
Yeah.
So really treating it as a business. We can't shy away from social enterprise and looking at SDP or sport for development as a business. I think, and I know that's a bold statement in and of itself, but if it's going to do more good, we have to really go there and say, investing in data, investing in measurement will lead to more money. And so if we can take what we're doing, all of us, and we're doing this collectively, but show the numbers, show the data, show where it's working, and that's a big challenge, isn't it? But show where it's working or where it's not working, and the cost of not taking an action.
Yeah. And
presenting that to a development bank or to private sector, then we're making progress.
That's a vital point. I mean, a lot of them there, but one being the cost of inaction. So inaction is a decision in itself.
Exactly.
So, any thoughts on kind of what kind of partnerships really maybe might open up some funding, or how are your programs kind of funded? Just purely through the football club, or is it through other kind of sponsors, or?
Well, we're very fortunate to have a lovely partner in the Premier League, who draw funding from the viewing money that we get in. So the Premier League, essentially within the Premier League, there's the charitable Trust, a charitable foundation, and what they are very good at is recognizing that each community works very differently. So where a football club sits, each community will have their own differences, and from that we're able, as football clubs, through our charitable trusts or foundations, are able to draw down money and to be able to fund projects. It's always a big conversation around that. Speaking from Leicester City Football Club and Leicester City in the community, we're now looking at a different model of how actually are we moving away from relying on the Premier League, because a lot of it is, again, if you're in the Premier League, then you get relegated. There's a parachute payment system, and what that can do is the knock-on effect is it impacts programmes. How are we looking at wider, if you like, how are we looking at other charitable opportunities, not just locally but nationally, in terms of how we can fund projects, but also how do we become sustainable ourselves through generating income. So you've got the football model, all the kids want to play for a football club. Not to say we take advantage of that in a negative way, but it's creating a service, say during the holidays and after school. How do we generate income from that, which creates unrestricted incomes to be able to fund different projects that are very much needed. So there's a real big conversation around that. In 2022, actually, I'm sure many of you have heard of Johan Cruyff, the great Dutch footballer. He has a foundation, and in partnership with Walkers, who are local, we were able to build a Cruyff pitch. Essentially, the Cruyff pitch are pitches that are located within inner city communities that people can access for free. So they're quality facilities. So with Walkers, we recycled some crisp packets and created a pitch, which was great. But again, working with a local organisation, Walkers, who are also nationally, internationally known, as well as Johan Cruyff Foundation, again, bringing these two partners, but probably from very different worlds, but actually understanding the local need, for us to be able to create opportunities that we can then deliver projects within the local community.
Great example in terms of innovation around partnerships. You also made an excellent point around co-creation. Making sure that engage with local partners, to listen to them and find out what's needed. So, any other thoughts on that in the African context? Co-creation of projects and initiatives, and building in local communities into as partners, as stakeholders into programs.
I don't know whether this might actually fit. I was actually looking on the initial question of which you're asking, how do we really go around the partnership, various partnerships? Commonwealth is working with Roche. Roche is a private diagnostic company, and somehow they have managed to give funding because somehow they will benefit. Their logo will be part and parcel of the policy. So they get access to the policy forums in a way. So it's a kind of a win-win situation. But clearly, we need to be creative, we need to be innovative. We have also tried to use the Commonwealth has got special envoy for particular SDGs, and we put them as a face to go to partners to really have that kind of a partnership and draw people to give us some funding. So it is an area where we are still navigating around and looking on how to have partnership which have got win-win situation. I think for us, especially with the sports, you have to be, I think, a bit careful in terms of not really compromising what we really want and what we really want to achieve.
Absolutely. The only partner I'd mention in terms of how we're pushing forward or how we're ensuring different perspectives are gathered is Sport and Dev. So the Sport and Dev is the global leading platform on knowledge sharing and development. It's called the International Platform of Sport Development. And we've worked with Sport and Dev and the Australian government now since 2020, just before the pandemic hit, to create the massive open online course, which, I guess in the height of the pandemic really shot up, but was discussing principles around sports and sustainable development, and has now got over 8,000
participants online on this course. It's had 4 runs of the course. It's an 8-week program, free. Anybody can use it. And actually a lot of sport development programs use it as a filler or as a filter for bids that they receive to see how serious people are about sports development, because it's such a deeply a really well thought out program, online course program. And now it's in 4 of the UN languages. So it's in the way to introduce it in Russian and Chinese. But what that's meant is you get immediate access to who's using this for the Commonwealth. And we get access to who are the different practitioners who are engaging with this content. And you can get a live snapshot of, okay, this part of this region is doing really well, or is embracing the learning. But to take it a step further, we've then now required officials in ministries who keep saying, we need help with our capacity. We're like, okay, well, please go through this program. It's an 8-week course online. Once you finish it, the incentive is to meet in person and to discuss how this applies in your different contexts. And we've had the first pilot project with the African Union June of this year. Record number of over 100 senior officials participated or did the call to action, and beyond that, met in Addis at the AU headquarters to have a really practical workshop on how they're using their sports policies, or what the challenges they're facing, and to learn from each other. So it's a step in the right direction. It will take place across the other 4 regions of the Secretariat, but yeah, that's sport endeavor is a real winner in that sense.
Any questions, any comments around partnerships?
Thank you so much, everyone. That was really interesting. I would love to go back to some of the points around co-creation and stakeholder engagement, especially when we're thinking about program design, implementation, as well as within policy as well. So as we know, wellbeing is very contested, and also it means different things for each person depending on, the wider kind of social, cultural, political context. So I was wondering if you had any best practice examples, either from sport for development program design, or whether it be national policy implementation around how co-creation and stakeholder engagement has been embedded in the wider conceptualization, but also the operationalization and the measurement of well-being. And yeah, I would love to kind of hear more about whether you have any kind of best practice examples, from what you've seen in policy practices.
Do you want to go first? Or do I go?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
You go.
So if looking at a local level, Leicester City and the community, I alluded to the point around women in football and sort of the disparity between the men's game and the women's game. But specifically with Leicester being a plural city, so whether where I think it's 53% are from ethnic diverse communities. How do we create spaces that include women but take into account the cultural barriers that they face? So Active Women is a project that we've now been running for the last 2 years, and what that essentially does is in some of the more diverse communities, so within the Wycliffe area, we are engaging with women specifically from South Asian Muslim backgrounds, engaging them and, if you like, removing barriers to sport. A key part of that was recognising within Leicester City and the community that there wasn't anyone that looked like those women. So therefore it was really important in a very transparent way to recruit the right people for those roles. So we recruited a diverse mix of women. And what that has essentially done is they're able to easily speak the language of the women that they're trying to recruit. And what we found from that is that it's not only it's also understanding, again, yes, there's a cultural barriers, but also understanding the nuances of relationships within those cultural contexts. Women are seen to be more the homemaker, and the men are out of work. So there's an understanding of actually if women are at home, if they're looking after the children, they're looking after the home, how are they then able to access these activities? So timing was a factor. So ensuring that it started after the school run and finished before the school run. So again, that was part of the conversation that they were able to have. Now, a lot of those conversations wouldn't have happened if you didn't recruit the people from those local communities. And again, it was such a powerful piece to be able to not only be someone who understands what they're going through, but also to show this is what you can do and this is what you can achieve. So I speak with Roxana, who is the coordinator of the program, and she's from a Muslim background. She wears a hijab. For the first time, she was wearing, I think for the first time in her life, she was wearing the Leicester City football tracksuit. And that in itself, for you and I, might be quite a regular thing of, but for her, it was massive. Some of the comments and the conversations that she was able to then draw from that was really inspiring, challenging, but inspiring on a number of levels. So that's one at sort of the local level. When we look at how we drive some of our initiatives nationally, working in the space that I work in, what's really important, going back to the piece around collaboration, ensuring that you are meeting with the right people, but also connecting with the right people to then raise issues at a higher level. So across the football clubs, we regularly meet to then lobby around inclusion, specifically inclusion to the likes of the Premier League, the FA, the EFL, the WSL. In the next couple of weeks, what's great is that they're going to be holding a summit at Wembley. But that summit is specifically on the agenda is diversity and inclusion. And for me, what's great is when I go to conferences, I see people like me. That's fine. But what I want to see at conferences, I want to see CEOs, I want to see CFOs, I want to see COOs, because those are the decision makers. So this summit that's happening in the next couple of weeks, we've pushed and we've asked questions, we've probed, we've challenged, and that summit in itself will see CEOs, owners, CFOs come to me specifically to discuss diversity and inclusion, not discuss the agenda of football and how they can benefit from it, but more so what are we doing as owners, as people that run these football clubs, to ensure that we're creating inclusive spaces.
Okay,
That's powerful.
yeah, indeed. Any examples or thoughts of any partnerships that facilitate programs?
The facilitate the continuity of programs. Yeah, I think Mauritius. Yeah, I did mention Mauritius in my keynote.
Yeah.
Mauritius is a keynote. Mauritius is, I mean, they really took their national sports policy and ran with it and made it their own. They have sports and an active lifestyle. They have an active Mauritius, and it went down even to, what are the real social issues in our society? What are the societal issues? Swimming, or how do we reduce issues of drowning in our swimming clubs? So they started using the tenets from the policy, created as part of Active Mauritius trainings and sessions, by the sea to kind of address this fear around water and the stigma around swimming and increase of participation there. Young people, they have when it comes to ageism and supporting health and well-being as you age, they're also at the forefront of that in terms of ensuring movement, that you're moving your body. They proposed Commonwealth moves, which is really how are we ensuring that as a society we are integrating sports, health, and well-being. And so they stand as a really good example for a country that has made it their own. And now when we in conversation with them, we're like, what are the next steps? What do you want to see as your next steps? And they say, well, we know it works. We've tested the policy. We know that it works. We need support with data measurement, like gathering of data and treating of that data so that we can make a case for other countries and also for ourselves. So Mauritius is a really key example, I think, absolutely worth including them in future conversations within the university. But also Namibia. Namibia, in the height of the pandemic, they decided to embark on a sports development index, SDI, the first of its kind. And they were very honest about the challenges that they went through in terms of gathering this data, door to door, trying to access their national sports, their national statistical agency, for example. And what it taught us as a secretariat is, it's not enough to meet with the organization, but it's also important that you work together with the actors that are local to the country. Happy to share more information after, I'm mindful of time, but happy to share more information on co-creation and how stakeholder management. But that's something that there's still a lot more and more creativity that can be applied around that.
I also want to mention South Africa as one of the models for combining a physical activity package at the primary healthcare level. Because we're missing a lot of risk factors at the really lower level. So somebody will go to a GP and then maybe he has malaria, but then malaria plus risk factors for the NCD. So South Africa is one of the examples, and we really want to replicate that to other Commonwealth countries.
You're correct, because I'm a psychologist and I work in public health.
So you mentioned about, lack of data being a barrier in finance.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, is there any emphasis on because I'm from India and we have a lot of similarity and overlap in terms of the barriers we face. And we have a similar data vacuum, you can say. So is there an emphasis on a knowledge creation policy? Where there is an emphasis from the Secretariat to actually find stakeholders who are willing to finance studies in Africa or in the global South generally, which we need. Obviously, I completely agree with you that there is a need to show the data that this works, but then that's not being done. So don't you think that a knowledge creation policy has to go hand in hand with the overall policy?
I really like that phrase, knowledge creation policy. We're a step removed from that with this global sport and SDG impact report. It's a first initial baseline. What is the lay of the land? For years, we've said sports has intrinsic power, that it works. And now I'm wearing my critical hat to say it works. How and where does it work? And so this baseline is showing across, not trying to do too much, just 60 domains, 60 indicators, 6 domains of impact across health, well-being, gender, environment. Where's the data? And/or if there's no data, this is the true picture for the sports sector, and we need to move from here to now this knowledge creation, a policy that works. What I know is back in 2017, there was the initial MINEPS meeting. I mentioned this, we worked together at MINEPS for Baku. But before then, there was one where different stakeholders put their hands up and said, okay, I'll work on a common set of indicators that measure sports contribution to the SDGs. So we put our hand up and did that. UNESCO then said, well, we're going to need a repository or a place where all this data goes. And that is still in the process of being made. WHO also said, well, we can support when it comes to health and well-being and indicators around that. And so an initial meeting called an open-ended working group was held with almost everyone that cares and is passionate and committed to sport, from academia to policy to practitioners, to ensure that they could critique any place within the SDGs where sports was making an impact. So this baseline impact report is as a result of those common, that indicator framework that was created. The next step will be, right, so your country, is kind of to create like an index to show your country. In India, you are well ahead on health and well-being, but you're lagging behind on education, for example. I know that's the case, but I'm just giving an example here, right? Or environment, what environment factors or what case studies exist within your country that we can move forward. And what that will then create is, what we're hoping this report creates will be momentum, a challenge people to really question whether this works. And what do we need to strap up and really work hard together to ensure that sport truly is a catalyst. We're hoping it serves as a catalyst for further investment and further investment in the sector. So yeah, once this report is complete, we'll share the findings. It'll be published everywhere. Thank you.
Question about.
Thank you very much. I've been enjoying the talks and the knowledge being shared. Well, I want to draw us back to some like basics or fundamentals. It's amazing when intelligent minds sit together and come up with lots of policies, data, and action plans. But then how do we bridge the gap between the policymakers and the intended targets, which is the countries, and where you want this, amazing ideas that you have put together to actually work? So I'll use Nigeria as a case study. We had a very embarrassing Olympics and Paralympics showing recently, not because we lack the policies or lack the funding, but because we lack the execution. So we are good at going to different meetings, UN and all of that, and you adopt this policy. So technically it's adopted, or we're going to do it. But then you come back and they keep it somewhere and everybody goes on business as usual. So I feel that if the UN, the Commonwealth, and all these policymakers who are trying to make sure that the world in general is moving in the right direction in terms of sport, in terms of health, well-being, and every other thing in between, if there is no implementation and a way to encourage that implementation, I think we're just running in circles. And that affects every other thing, from finance, equality, diversity, and any other thing you may come up with. Because even though we try to paint these pictures, what happens when government change? So you may have a president who is forward thinking and who is like pro everything you're talking about, and is trying to work on these policies. And then a new government comes in, dumps everything, even sets back some rules, and then come up with things that are like setting you back 20 years back to where you were coming from. So how do you kind of try to bridge that realistic gap?
Okay, that's a really great question and a very real question. If I may, I'll just start, and then please do add on as well. How you bridge that gap, just to go straight to it, is in investing in the technical officers. So that the minister will change. That the PS will change, the permanent secretary will change. Well, there's no permanence there. That there's going to be evolutions and changes in government. But if you invest in the technical officers, the people who have been responsible in writing these policies or the national guiding frameworks, for example, and you raise their understanding and their appreciation, their capacity to on sports and how sports reaches their national outcomes, that's one clear way of ensuring continuity. Those are the same people that, just to give you a real example, those are the same people we work with on these advisory boards. So we will not have, we'll welcome a sports minister, for example, within the Commonwealth Advisory Body on Sport, for example, but we would need the technical officers, the people that work on the day-to-day, the people who can pick up the phone or call them on WhatsApp and say, hey, have you moved this forward? Where are you stuck? Can you attend this meeting? To make it really real and to kind of cut across that blue tape, that red tape, or in terms of action and implementation. Other people that we must and work together with are accredited organizations or CSOs. Civil society has always been the biggest voice of society. They're the ones who keep us accountable and on track, keep the governments on track. So investing in them and working directly with them, you've already negated all that red tape and ensured that they are part of the conversation from jump. The other thing to do is to ensure, you appreciate that it's going to change with each new government. There'll be changes in policy. But if in working together, when we go for technical assistance, for example, the optics, you have to consider optics, you have to consider who am I coming in as? How do you see me? Do you see me as just parachuting in and supporting you and then getting out? Change that, critique that by saying, okay, I'm here to listen. This is what you're saying. What are you saying are the real challenges here? What has been a long-standing social policy issue here? Is it unemployment? How have you gone about tackling it? How can I then support you? Who do you need in the room? And then by using the strength and the privileged position of your logo to bring in those people into that conversation, to bring in that money into that conversation. So those are some of the ways we tried to cleverly navigate changes in government, while not reducing, the opportunities for impact. Dan, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, maybe, just what what Lynn has actually said. Within the Secretariat, we're also using youth voices.
Yes.
And I think a very big investment for us is also put across the youth, our youth people. So we have a youth council, which is a very unique type of a council, and they have an opportunity of actually asking the heads of government what has really been achieved. So the youth council consists of various Commonwealth Youth Network. We have yeah, there are 13 network for youth, network for law, network for. So you're really very right. But if our young people would have, we are giving them voices to actually ask the heads of government. You have deliberated on this. Why haven't you not really take action? So somehow using also the youth within the Secretariat is an avenue for us to ensure there is continuity. I totally agree that ministers do go to the meetings, they deliberate, and then next time they go into another meeting, they actually forget. So we really have to have an accountability mechanism. And for us, we're using our young people as an avenue to raise voice on the areas where we haven't really implemented. We also have professional bodies, and as Lena said, accredited organizations, professional organizations, which really work very closely at the grassroots level. And we are using also that to ensure that there is that kind of accountability. It is a challenge, but we are working, at least within the Secretariat, I can say we have really very various arms, and we're using the various arms to ensure that somehow there is accountability.
It's okay, I'm going to roll on to the next question, which is on innovation and tradition, which I mentioned that already. So what challenges and opportunities exist in balancing innovation with tradition in addressing sports, health and well-being? How can these be navigated successfully? So thoughts on innovation and tradition, sports, methods of intervention, any thoughts?
I think one of the key challenges that we face, I suppose everyone faces, is when it comes to change. You'll always come up against people that don't want to change. I think I was at a conference last year, and someone said to me, change doesn't take time, it's people. It's the people that take the time to make those changes. And that's a real big challenge, because people then begin to think about equal opportunity, so access to resources, you mentioned money as well, and being part of that. COVID highlighted the digital divide in that as well. But I think the opportunities are specifically around innovation. For us as within football, there's so much to learn from the outside world, from different sports, from different organisations, from the retail sector, hospitality, you name it. There's so much that we can learn. And what I want to pick out one area specifically was around esports. What we recognised, COVID definitely moved us more online. And for us, it was really important. How do we utilise that as a resource to engage with young people? So away from the competition, away from the status and the level and the broadcast of esports. For us, it was actually, how do we begin to create conversations with those that aren't engaging with school? So COVID again has had a real impact on young people attending school and education. It seems more now of a right to miss school than it was back in the day when you had to go to school. People are making those decisions. So for us, it was really important. How do we engage with young people? So through esports, it was more of a case of, right, we can check in on their well-being. We can check in on mentoring, or rather we can create opportunities for mentoring. We can create opportunities for conversation, and all through the medium of esports, so gaming. So we invested quite heavily with that, especially within Leicester City and the community. And what that did for us was it created an avenue that we, had never explored, but equally was really effective in terms of, if you like, the hidden young people that weren't attending schools. So for me, that's really it. The two challenges, the challenges specifically around people seeking the change. How do we get them on board? What are some of those conversations that we need to have? Almost you feel like a politician having to lobby a lot of the time to get people on board. But then again, being really open to innovation, what's happening outside of our world that we can draw upon, that we can learn, and not being too proud. I'll say this between this room, but and it's online as well. We can have a lot of, everyone has an ego, and egos are on different levels. Within football, there are some egos that are bigger than others. And it's how do we navigate that? How do we begin to have those conversations where actually we bring people on board and we say it's okay for us to look at changes. It's okay for us to look at this differently. And these are the benefits that you will get out of them. And again, it can be a real slow, arduous process to be able to enable that to happen. But it's one that we have to be ready to commit to because it's never going to happen overnight.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, so resistance to change, I think is one of the biggest for me, and and also the cultural aspect of it, and people would really tend to adhere to some of the cultural beliefs and values, but I think we have an opportunity, especially within the Secretariat. I just want to draw an example of that kind of an intergenerational dialogue where the young people hear from the people who have aged like me, who are really like very difficult to change, but the intergenerational dialogue is an avenue where people really like speak and share expertise, young vis-a-vis the elderly, and we do conduct a lot of intergenerational dialogues, not only for sports and health, but also for human rights, and we are seeing somehow there is a positive out of it, but it's really a big process. I think it's a big process. One of the other barriers is actually the digital divide, and I totally agree that we need somehow to devise mechanisms of ensuring most of our African countries somehow have got that kind of an access and equity, because that is also one of the barriers. The consortium for us, the AI consortium within the Commonwealth Secretariat, has got various work streams. We know AI now is somehow taking it another direction. So the Secretariat is working with Intel, actually working with private organizations to somehow support countries in terms of really addressing that kind of a digital divide. So yes, we have challenges, but then we have opportunities. So,
Suppose we've touched on it in terms of what are, how do you ensure that policy moves beyond the shelf, that when you get back from conferences, it's moving ahead. And then you also asked me a really important question on what's next, or surely has no one thought about where we move to. So really I'd bring it back to the baseline and initial results, impact report, the sports and SDG impact report. I think when it's out there and it's shared and people are able to see, countries specifically are able to see, when it comes to sports, health and well-being, for example, this is where I stand and I can do better. It'll definitely disrupt how we've been thinking, around sport. And for some, it may be that now sport will be brought more to the center and health. For others, it may be that they will have to consider other ways to be creative and innovative, to embrace technology. And so I would say measurement will will focus on improving policy, it will improve people's well-being, and it will progress partnerships as well. So those 3 Ps will come as a result of that. And I had another really important point around tracking and how we also make that more accessible. So this is still in the works, but in terms of AI readiness, Janneth has mentioned that we're working with private sector companies to support that continuity and that introduction to AI and how that works in country. The sports team is also now working with Sport Ready Sport Global. They are a female-led AI organization, and they want to support us, because they're a smaller group, they're more dynamic in the sense that they can help us work with just test within member countries. You have your national sports policy. Do you understand what it's about? Can we help you summarize it? So using these tools to summarize it and then make it their own as well. So that's going to be a very interesting partnership coming up in the new year. And we will roll that into our technical assistance as well with them. So that will hopefully reduce the barriers to participation and the digital divide that exists across different regions. So you have a small country like Kiribati being part of that conversation, mindful of time zones, but also just what are you doing that's working there? And what are you doing in Sierra Leone that's working, for example? That cross-pollination of ideas will hopefully lead to better measurement. But yeah, it's down to measurement. Measurement leads to progress. Progress leads to better society for everybody. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks. Okay, I just open this up to the audience for any very quick comments or questions. Very briefly, please.
Yeah, so just what to borrow from Richard, the M word, one which we've had success with is mandate. And you talk about baselines. So what are your thoughts on like the Secretariat having a baseline of like a minimum consensus of legal or statutory, things that each member state must have as a sports or to be part of the organization per se? Because in my experience, it's really worked. Because when you set that baseline, if you want to be part, and for us, Commonwealth is a big thing. It's one of the only places we actually win medals. So we are not going to try and run away from this. So having a baseline that you need to have these bare minimum provisions in policy, for example. What do you think about that?
It's really good. We're taking it the route for sports and health provisions, but that's also a really unique selling point. I think people would bite on that. I think it would lead to, it's there when it comes to representation on your boards.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But if we take it down to
the sports policy
level, I think that's a really good idea. I'm not sure if that's already been done. But if not, then yeah, definitely that's a conversation to take up. To include you in that.
Innovation, learn from outside.
Very good.
Okay, well, great. Thanks so much. I think it's been a tremendous panel, a great one to start the Africa Summit with, I think. We've had very much the global and also the local, but in a way, the global in the local in Leicester, because it's such a diverse community as well. And just, I suppose, a final comment from me, just to go back to the partnership thing, keep Loughborough University in mind. When you're looking for partners and you're developing your programs and your policies, etc. But if the audience would like to join me in thanking Lynn, Janneth and John for their great presentation.